We continue with our Discernment of Spirits Mondays. Just a quick review of what we have done so far. First, we covered the first 4 rules, which kind of were an introduction just to the discernment of spirits, right? How does an enemy act when we're moving away from God or towards God? What is spiritual consolation and what is spiritual desolation? And then we just finished covering the rules from 5 to 9. And these 5 rules kind of focus on what to do while we are in spiritual desolation. What are things to do, ways of thinking, as a way of fighting back and finding freedom. Today, as we begin Rule 10, there's a little bit of a shift to what to do now during spiritual consolation. And so we could maybe give a title to this Rule 10, Spiritual Consolation, a time to prepare. So let me read you the rule, which is the most brief of all the rules. The 10th. Let the one who is in consolation think how he will conduct himself in the desolation which will come after, taking new strength for that time. So we can see here, while St. Ignatius is telling us what to do during spiritual consolation, he's still focused on trying to fight desolation, right? He's kind of talking about preparing for the time when desolation comes, even though one is at this moment during spiritual consolation. So even though the focus is what do you do during consolation, still linked with how do we prevent or fight desolation. Now I have a friend who I was talking to him a couple months ago about this rule, and he was telling me how he did not like this rule. He was saying, yeah, why focus on desolation while you are enjoying consolation? And actually, I think there's a truth to what he was saying, and actually Father Gallagher talks about it in the book before he gets into kind of expounding upon what Ignatius says. He says that it's important that the first focus when we're in consolation, it's in the receiving of the gift. Before we start thinking about desolation or how to prepare, whatever, first we must enjoy the gift that the Lord is giving us. I want to read to you a quote that Father Gallagher puts here from Elizabeth Seton and her receiving consolation. And some of the things we can learn about receiving the gift. She writes, in the year 1789, when my father was in England, one morning in May, in the lightness of a cheerful heart, I jumped in the wagon that was driving to the woods for brush, about a mile from home. The boy who drove it began to cut, and I set off into the woods. Soon found an outlet in a meadow, and a chestnut tree with several young ones growing around it. Found rich moss under it and a warm sun. Here then was a sweet bed, the air still, a clear blue vault above, the numberless sounds of spring melody and joy, sweet clovers and wild flowers I had got by the way, and a heart as innocent as human heart could be, filled even with enthusiastic love to God and admiration of His works. God was my Father, my all. I prayed, sang hymns, cried, laughed, talking to myself of how far He could place me above all sorrow. Then I laid still to enjoy the heavenly peace that came over my soul. And I am sure in the 2 hours so enjoyed grew 10 years in the spiritual life. Just reading this, it's a little bit of holy ground. Elizabeth Seton is sharing, something very intimate to her heart and spiritual life, a great consolation she is receiving there in God's nature, and very aware of God's presence, laughing, crying, and then just being at peace for what seems to be just 2 hours, right? During this time, it would be odd if Elizabeth would begin to just think about desolation, the Lord is giving her a great gift. Her faith is being deepened. Her heart is expanding, right? She should just receive that gift, right? Our primary task when we're in spiritual consolation is to accept what God is doing within us, to accept the new life He's giving with us, right? No other spiritual purpose must distract us from simply receiving God's gifts in time of spiritual desolation, and not even, right, all that Ignatians will say in this rule, which we're going to um, expound here in the next couple weeks. First thing, that's in consolation, receive the gift, enjoy it. The Lord is giving you a time of intimacy with Him, allowing you to experience it, and so you first just enjoy.